doing science and
I'm not that
projects.
bright, but I'm just consistent, that's all.
So,
I'm consistent.
so just calling the meeting to order. Okay, you guys, going. So is Ginap here?
He is on.
Is he online?
Dale, are you on?
Yes, yes, we're here.
Okay.
Dale and Imelda are here.
All right, so we'll turn it over for your presentation.
Excuse me, Karen Herrick is here on voice only.
Excellent, thank you.
You want us to just proceed? I assume you have an intro or I mean.
No intro, none necessary.
Okay, very good. We can get started. So what we will do is sort of bring, I thought it would be helpful to review a little bit of how we got to where we are and where we're going the next step. Please interrupt us at any point. Imelda is here with me, who's very knowledgeable of the MSBA system and is aware of the project. She was not intimately involved in the work that we did so far, but we're both available to answer questions. This is a diagram of the overall MSBA process.
You need to share your screen.
Oh, sorry. It's always the trick I find in the background to get. There, is that better?
Excellent.
Okay, great. So what we had done with the town before was the master planning effort. And I apologize if I'm going through things that you know very well, but the MSBA process really begins with a statement of interest. And what they're looking for with that is that, you know, the town wants to do a project of such and such, you know, a new high school, renovate a high school, whatever it may be. So we had worked with the town to look at really master planning for the elementary schools, which led to the town submitting the statement of interest. And you were selected and invited into what they referred to as the eligibility period. So that is this module one, and we'll kind of go through this and talk about, but it has a number of steps that you're doing, one of which was appointing a school building committee, of which you have all been selected to. So now there is this, the steps that need to go through in order to submit documents as required by the eligibility period in the anticipation of hoping to be asked to go forward. I will say, first of all, that the town did very well. There was roughly 118 submissions, I believe, statements of interest for school projects, and you were one of 17 that was selected to proceed into this eligibility period. That, the timeline that MSBA provides for that is 270 days. And I think you were received notice and sort of were invited in June 1st. So essentially you have until February 26th to accomplish these goals. And you were well on your way. I know a lot of work has happened, and I think you're on a track to submit most of those materials much earlier than that. I was asked to go back a little bit and talk about how we got to where we are. And one of the things that happened, the key thing was we were asked by the school and town administrations to do a master plan in order to inform the submission of the statement of interest. And the MSBA essentially allows a town to do one project with them at a time. Many towns, you may be familiar, do multiple projects, but only one are MSBA funded, and they may be doing others that are totally at their expense with no MSBA reimbursement. And we work with a couple towns that are doing that now. So the first thing was, with the elementary schools, it was very unclear what direction you wanted to go, and the MSBA is really looking for something that is much more than just saying we need to do something with the school. And I think part of why you were selected is partly is your need, and the other part is that you were very well prepared to provide them a base of information. So we worked with the school committee, the building committee, the administrations to do basically a master plan, which consisted of a few components. One was looking at your enrollment needs, and going into it, there was a lot of concern, I guess I'll say, or thinking that you did not have dramatic current enrollment increases, and that's one factor that leads to MSBA inclusion or assistance with funding. So your enrollment, when we really looked at, and we worked with the company NESDEC, who does most of these enrollment projections, really shows an enrollment projection of about 6%. Which does not seem like a lot, but it's 115 students, 7 or 8 classrooms, but somewhat of a smaller component. We looked at the programming since the elementary schools have been done in the past, and really over these last 15 years since the first of those schools were implemented, you can see it was added about 17 classrooms for special ed. It took up about 9 for kindergarten and some pre-K. So that really caused an space needs increase of about 29% of what schools are built for. And I should have explained the 6% is not a 6% enrollment, but when you translate that to educational space that's required, it's about a 6% increase in floor area, if you will, or educational space. So those two things together led to that you really have a space need in the elementary schools of about 35%. So when you compare that, that every school should be 30 to 40% larger than they are now, that's a very significant increase, and it's part of the reason the town was looking to do something, and as well why MSBA has looked at the project. So we worked with doing what we call the master plan to determine these long-term planning options, and really what that consisted of, and I'll sort of give you a quick capsule of what we found, but was looking for a plan for the next 20 years, knowing that if you might need another school in 30 years, but you certainly don't want to build space for that would sit vacant until 30 years from now. So 20 years is usually the ideal sort of time to be looking forward, even though you may not build all of that space, to acknowledge that pre-K continues to grow and somehow fold that into the system, even though it's not directly part of the MSBA process. And so the steps that we went through was we looked at enrollment projections. We did an evaluation of all the buildings. We looked at all the classroom spaces and the other support spaces that were there. Obviously, there's only so many kids a cafeteria can do, et cetera. So we looked at all of those things and determined the capacity of the existing building. And then we looked at programs going forward, meaning educational programs, and determined the space needs that is required for that enrollment and the types of educational program that you have and anticipate. And from that, we tried to look at the development options, long-term planning options for the town to evaluate. And this occurred over a number of presentations and evaluation of the building, some of which, and I'll explain them now, some of which are somewhat self-evident. So from that, we looked at an array of, it was probably 15 or more different options in terms of moving kids, redistricting, thinking about adding spaces to the buildings. And we came up with really 2 most viable scenarios, which became renamed to Scheme A and B, both largely focused on Killam. And so these are the existing sites that you see to the right, the white, and the yellow is indicating new construction. So this is one, we sort of use this monopoly house diagram, if you will, for what these options are. So the Scheme A was really solving all of the problem at Killam. There was another option looking at a combination of Killam and Birch Meadow, both requiring additional space. And I'll kind of back into, why there were these 2 and how we came more to looking at just a Killam solution. Well, actually, it's worth doing now. So since there were these 2 options, the issue, and we had started this project with the town by saying, as consultants and people who evaluate this, we were going to try to identify advantageous options for you. But it was really for the town to select what is the most advantageous for you. And there are a number of factors, including the total cost is less if it's one site. However, people, especially the elementary schools, prefer to have smaller schools. So combining at one site isn't, leads to a larger school. And then there is the MSBA participation. And one of the issues, that being that you can only have one school in the MSBA system at a time. So to do, say, a new school, a smaller new school at Killam, and when that is completed, do something at Birch, it really meant a timeline of something like 8 to 10 years before any improvement would be at the Birch Meadow School and be able to accommodate your total program. There also were considerations such as keeping kids or students so that sort of together, so that when a class moves to the middle school, the whole class goes together. We did look, and this would require a little bit of rezoning. We did look at options that required extensive rezoning, which for numerous reasons were not desirable. But you do look at redistricting on a regular basis. So I'll kind of go on to, the non-advantageous to just give you a quick capsule. But these two, the Killam School in particular, kept floating to the top as the most viable option, partly because of land and access. We did look at this array. This is a sort of list which went out to you before, but I'll just kind of walk through. We looked at renovating the Killam School and, building a small. The gym is very undersized. The cafeteria is very undersized for a little bit larger school. The classrooms are of better size. So the green sort of indicates possible renovation and putting an addition on Birch, and then trying to deal with the pre-K, perhaps at Wood End. And it also required redistricting a significant amount of Joshua Eaton in order to move that over to the Birch and Killam areas. We looked at doing an addition at Wood End. While somewhat the site is fairly tight because of issues there, but the bigger thing is that the access is very difficult in terms of the town streets that lead to Wood End. And more importantly, that's the least populous part of town. So these little, areas indicate here would have been just sort of indicating a base level of redistricting. So it would have meant a lot of students having to be bused or otherwise transported to Wood End part of town, where the growth is really happening in the Killam and Joshua Eaton area. We looked at, we're doing a combination that way and making the addition smaller and redistricting more, and this had mostly to do with how we were handling pre-K. We looked at doing an all-new school at both Killam and Birch Meadow. This became more costly, and again, the timeline became a factor. And it also meant that there was a significant amount of redistricting that had to happen between Wood End, Killam, Birch, and the timeline became one of the key issues. We looked at just such as renovating all the schools and trying to make something happen. We looked at putting an addition at all of the schools. There were other factors such as Josh Eaton, and I hope I'm not getting into too much, just give you a kind of an overview. The site is, although there is some open land, the configuration of the site makes it very difficult to really add to that school. It has the historical front, and there's a number of issues with trying to add to the building. It has been added to a number of times. The Barrow School, the same thing. The configuration, the slope of the site made it difficult. So it really kept coming back over and over again to Killam and Birch as the two candidates. One of the considerations is that the Killam site, as you know, the building sits to the front, is the implementation. Because you basically need to build a new school, but you have to keep the existing school operating. And so how is that done? And that's part of what will happen during the next sort of design phases. There was, in addition, consideration just of trying to build a new school in another place, and also swing space was considered for rental, which is rarely a good long-term solution for a municipal building. But there had been a number of searches in the past for other projects and other program types, so it didn't seem like a sixth site was really an available option. So these things were gone through, and ultimately working with the administrations, it was concluded that the real key to the project and the best long-term solution is to address the growth at the Killam site. Now, it's on a path to consider a new building on that site. This is the way it was presented, in order to address all of the elementary school growth and program needs. However, that was put against backdrop of that the Killam site is not as large as would normally be desired for a school of that size. So it may, for instance, be in a 3-story building, which we would tend to think of a 1- or 2-story building. And I don't want to be alarmed about that. There will be a lot of time to vet that, but that is something that's seen very common in schools now, because many towns have the very similar problem that you do not have enough space. So the way this was presented and the thoroughness of the information that the town had available, you passed muster, I guess we'll say, and were invited into the eligibility period. So that is what the MSBA basically refers to as the preparation period. So they really kind of, the 3 big chunks is preparation. So in other words, determining if in fact they will fund your school and you meet all of the requirements. And once that's decided, the second phase that is beyond February is this scope definition. And that is really about getting into the schematic design. And we could talk about that, but it leads to actually an agreement between the town and MSBA. It is the project funding agreement, and that is a very significant document that leads to the next step of actually the final design and construction of the school. And I know there is a question about the funding that's necessary at this time or before February, and that is really the funding. This current phase does not have funding. You do not have consultants other than a limited amount like our advising and consulting, but it's really you're funding the next step to hiring OPM and designer to go through the process of the school, which, by the way, we would not be that architect. We would love to do it, but we have a contract with MSBA and provide consulting, so we are allowed to do this, but we cannot be the designer for schools that are being funded, in the phases of being funded by the MSBA. So we're really providing this as a third party outside, trying to provide guidance. So the steps that need to happen during this, and we know you're well underway, you've formed a building committee, was one of those steps. The initial compliance certification, it's really just a document that says you will comply with the MSBA requirements along the way. You formed the committee, the educational profile, and enrollment process. Those are things that I know you're currently working on, and the work that we did is the master plan is some of the background for that. Maintenance and capital planning, I know various people in facilities and the business office, I think at the town, are working on those. This is, I don't want to summarize it too much, but essentially it's demonstrating that you take care of your buildings. And there's sort of a long history about that. They don't want to fund towns that build a new building and let it fall apart. So it demonstrates that you have done what you can do to take care of the building. And then local authorization, in other words, town appropriating the money to go to the next phase, which as we talk about, is this scope definition. So I think you're on a path for this fall town meeting, but one of the significant portions of this is that the town funds the feasibility study and the schematic design of the project. And again, not speaking for the MSBA, but the part of why they want to fund that is they want to know that if they accept you into the program, you know, the town is behind it, has provided the funding in order to go the next step and be queued for construction. Now, you're not funding construction dollars at you know, during this current task that we're talking about here, but rather hiring the owner's project manager, hiring the designer, and taking the project through those phases of schematic design. So we're in this same period that, you know, there was a to-do list, which I know, I understand that you're pretty familiar with, that you're well underway. I'm happy to back up and walk through this if that would be beneficial. But there's a certain number of things that need to be submitted, and I'm informed by the town manager that these are very much underway and you know, on track. So the funding is, as I say again, is after what is this module 1, and it really is the funding for modules 2, tasks 2 through 5. They really refer to these steps as modules. It's just the MSBA language. So module 2 is forming the project team. So this is hiring the consultants, most specifically the architect designer and the owner's project manager. It is then doing the feasibility study services, so it's funding that, and that is beyond what we have done. We really took the master planning to help the town get from, we need to do something about the elementary schools, to understanding the issues and building a consensus that we want to undertake a new building project at the Killam site. So the feasibility study that will be done will be far more in-depth, looking at the site, this issue I mentioned about the size of the building compared to the site, how it can be implemented, whether the building is pushed back on the site or it's done in a different configuration. And it really set things up to a feasibility study and needs to look at considerations for redistricting, looking at possible grade restructuring. All of this was sort of vetted as part of the master plan to know where the town was headed. And then the schematic design, and this is a very significant portion of the work and really leads to a project funding agreement, which says, this is what we want to build, this is what it looks like, more or less, but this is the scope that we're going to do, this is what it's going to include for program, this is the configuration, this is how it looks, and this is what it costs. And that is, a very significant element as you go forward. Things that are not included, if you add something later, the MSBA will not participate in the cost of. So there is a lot of pressure on that schematic design phase. So this has a checkbox at the end here for funding the project, but that's the next funding for the construction later. Right now, the funding is to do these tasks of the feasibility study. And those for an elementary school, I'll actually skip ahead a slide. This gives you an example of some other towns over recent years. We just sort of picked some that were in the 650s, the 750 size. You can see these different towns, and some of these go back to 19. But when you escalate them, they're in the $2 million sort of range, or possibly a little bit less. And so this was a conversation before that the town was structuring to go forward for a $2.2 million appropriation. And this is an example breakout. These are estimates that we did based on looking at many schools that we've reviewed over the past, 5+ years. So designer fees, and, these sort of calculate out, looking at percentage around $750,000. Reimbursable costs, $20,000. So, these, can be things that are sort of unforeseen, but, if there's advertising expenses, there's fees perhaps to go to Conservation Commission, different kinds of, things that, just come up that are direct costs. There's a significant amount of testing that is done, geotechnical, environmental hazardous materials, getting a site survey, wetlands, traffic study, and again, these are all just examples of things that need to be done. I will say, we'll go through it, the OPM fees, for that phase, and again, they're overseeing, working with you throughout. It's primarily the feasibility study and schematic design. We put an estimating contingency here, and then market conditions 10%. So those are some big numbers, but it's what we are seeing happening now with the current school projects. That comes out to around $2 million. And we added escalation because over the past 2 years now, construction cost and everything that goes with it has just been, dramatically going up. So engineering is costing more, site surveys, just all of the components. So that's sort of what makes up the $2.2 million.
And kind of on that point, the slides that Dale went over previously about the different options, those were 2020 numbers. So kind of like these fees here for this next phase, like all of these numbers need to be escalated. And it is very important to make sure that you appropriate enough now and be able to do all of the testing that you need to do now, because at the end of this next phase, at the end of Module 5, that's when the funding by the MSBA gets determined and established. So the more you know going into the project funding agreement, the more you can make sure that you're covered and that the MSBA is covering enough of your project.
And on that note, I know this always like self-serving, but don't shortchange what you do on these testing and the engineering. Let's take the traffic study, for instance. You have a school there now, but if you underdid, say, traffic and didn't realize that you needed 2 new stoplights or, widening a street or turn lanes or whatever it might be, or anything, with, say, hazardous materials, if it's not included in the project funding agreement after you do the schematic design, the state is not going to fund it. So you want to get this right and have enough funding to do whatever you may determine is necessary to determine an accurate cost. That is a very difficult thing for towns currently in the program because escalation costs have gone up. So people who set their funding agreement 2 years ago, and now escalation construction costs are ramping up. They're finding it very difficult to bring these projects in on budget. The other point I would make is you don't have to spend this money just because you appropriate it now. If you fund, $2.2 million or whatever towards the school, and you do not need it during this phase, you can carry that forward into, the next, cost and construction and the final design. And I don't mean to minimize, the difficulty of appropriating large sums of money when it's not known, but that is an issue. And you don't have to spend it at this time during this phase just because it's appropriated now. So that really is the task for this current eligibility period. I'll pause, we can take questions. We do have slides that we can walk you through the steps after this. If you'd like to do that through completion, or if there's any other direction you'd like us to go.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you, Dale. Maybe you could touch base, you covered the, what's included in that feasibility study. in that checklist, pretty good. But maybe you could just give us sort of a broad brush in layman's terms overview of what's completed during that study and kind of what we end up with when we're done with the feasibility study.
Sure. So the feasibility study is going to advance beyond, I think I'll unshare the screen if that
Sure.
is. How do I get out of this? There we go. So the feasibility study, what MSBA is looking for, I guess I'll say in the town as well, is are you making the best investment? So one of the things is it will confirm and update the things such as the enrollment projections and what your needs are. They want you to look at, and again, the feasibility is, will a building of this size for what you want to do, say it's all of the pre-K and elementary school, fit on the site? What does that look like, and is it appropriate? The MSBA really won't tell you, oh, we think, you know, the building's too tall on your site. That's really a town decision. But can you meet the educational requirements, have adequate play space? You know, essentially what is, you know, meet the educational program. But they want you to look at considerations for some redistricting. Could you manage this by, the first question is, could you avoid doing a project, say by redistricting or some other maneuver? Some towns occasionally, you know, just they change the grade structure and say move the 5th grade to the middle school. That was discussed, was not really an option for you. But they will want to see those things sort of vetted out and documented, and to know that what's going and proposed to go on the Killam site is right. Then there is the sort of physical feasibility study of it, to know how that it will fit and how that works, that the traffic and all of those things are reasonable. And again, mostly the reasonableness, if you will, if you meet the educational spec, is really the discretion of the town for you to decide. And then it goes to the schematic design. And the schematic design is really where the rubber hits the road, if you will. You've made your decision through the feasibility study, how many students you want to put on the site, you know, the grades, what the action with pre-K is, all of those things. And then the schematic design really lays out the building. I mean, you have rooms and door swings, and, you know, it's very, very thoroughly thought through. The program is scrutinized very much in detail by MSBA and your designer. There is signed affidavits that the program and the square footages are accurate. And if things change after that, you have to go back to DESE and, you know, get their approval of whatever changes may happen. It has to be, you know, gone through and vetted with MSBA. So really, once you do that schematic design, and especially, and based on that is the cost estimate, and that also is the basis of your project funding agreement with MSBA. So after that, if anything changes of significance, and even if the educational space, you know, the classroom changes by 10 square feet, and you know, it's given over to the maintenance room or vice versa, those things have to all be documented and we'll say approved by MSBA. Minor changes often happen, but there is a great amount of pressure on the town and your designer to have, and your OPM, to have the schematic design very closely reflect what you ultimately bid. And it will have elevations of the building and the character. There is a plan, or a requirement that the schematic design, that you show different schematic options, that is really vetted. And again, that's gonna be really at the direction of the town. And MSBA ultimately approves, but they're not trying to second guess your design and the town's judgment about the program. They're looking to make sure that you're meeting the educational requirements. So the outcome of this, and that's why the cost is high. It's not just sort of something thrown together. It's very carefully documented, those things we mentioned, site surveys, water conditions, wetlands. You need to have an approval basically from all the town boards. So like with engineering, to know you have water, sufficient water and sewer and gas, on-site cost, off-site cost, traffic. Sorry. And so that schematic design, really beyond that, is, if you will, just working out the details in order to be able to bid and do the construction. So I know I talked too much. Is that a?
No, that was excellent, thank you.
Okay.
Quick follow-up on that, so we have a November town meeting, and I believe that the requirement for funding, the date was in February, so we're in line to go to town meeting and to vote on that. And presumably the feasibility study would start around February of 2023. What's the projected time frame to do that feasibility study? And another question, if we were to explore doing a model school program, where would that fit into the process to examine that option?
That would happen, looking at the model school would happen right out of the gate. If you wanted to do that, you would immediately, if you're accepted in the eligibility period that's approved, you would, tell us MSBA that you're interested in doing that, look at the different programs and, building types and so on. The next phase, the feasibility study, they have some timelines, and basically within 150 days, so call it 5 months after the February deadline, and you get approved for the eligibility, you have 150 days to get the design team together. So that's primarily the architect and the OPM. There's some other elements to that, computer technology, etc. And then there is I'll combine 375 days that they allow, up to 375 days for the feasibility study and the schematic design. And they really look at that basically as 300 for the feasibility, so almost a year, and then the schematic design, 75 days. But it's you're not held to, in other words, you can complete it much faster than that if the town's able to. But that gives you a bit of an insight there. With 300 days allowed to do the feasibility study and 75 days to do the schematic, that right there tells you that they expect the feasibility study to be, a very serious analytical, of your needs and the direction that you're going in, because that's the bulk of it. And I'll say things that you probably, already know, a big part of that is understanding, input from the town, building consensus, doing financing, educational, community. So that's part of the reason that timeline is longer. So if I answered that, and then there's 90 additional days to finalize the project scope and funding agreement. So you have almost 2 years there, that you can take, to form the team and end up with a schematic design and the agreement. The MSBA has a rolling schedule now. When you go forward, your OPM and you would work out a schedule and establish deadlines, and you really, you're allowed to move as fast as you can. It's not a cycle that you have to wait for after you get through this first period.
Okay, thank you. So broad brush, we would start in the winter of 2022, 2023, about 6 months to get the consultants on board. And from the summer of 23 to the summer of 2024 would be effectively the feasibility study, sort of broad brush.
Yes,
Okay.
right. And then by that fall, you'd be complete with the schematic design, right?
Okay.
And again, these are guidelines, across the board. So, it could be that you'd be combining, another town, 2 high schools or something. So for a single building elementary school, I would think, you could very well move a little faster. But as a broad brush, that's right, into the following year to be done with feasibility and schematic.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Carla.
Dale, this may not be a fair question for you, but with the model school program,
Oh, yes.
can you give us a sense of cost savings with that option?
Well, in terms of dollars, no. But first of all, if you do a model school program, you get an additional couple percent. I used to know that. I should know that. Additional reimbursement from MSBA if you use the model school program. It will reduce both OPM and designer fees because the building is, has been done and is significantly built. It doesn't have to be the exact. I mean, these buildings, there's a sort of direction and a prototype, and, it might be, a little smaller footprint or bigger, add some classrooms, or, there's usually a tweaking that happens. So a few advantages, it does save some cost because it has been sort of designed previously. It gives you some additional reimbursement, and it saves a lot of time because the feasibility study is still, significantly needs to be done, but and the schematic design is shorter. But the big, time saving comes off in the next phase when you really go into final design. That could shave, off, let's say, off of a year of final design. That could take a third to half of that time frame off. The other benefit that it does is, all of these schools are very expensive, and I probably shouldn't say that, but the reality is, but these schools have been done, and there is sort of a track record, and kind of gives you an idea, what level of school you are, and, the trend that it has been. There are some that are prototypes that are a little more, less costly than others. And there is also, it helps reduce the unknowns because the building has been built a few times. If there's a bug in the plans, it's been already identified and fixed. That's not to say you're not going to have any change orders, but in the end, you save, I'll say, several percent anyway by doing the model school.
Thank you.
I will say, and this is maybe more important in my world than yours, but one of the things that will happen, there is a designer selection process. And if you go through, one scenario is to go through the feasibility study and you know exactly what you need, and then you choose a model school, you will end up with the architect of that model school. So that is one factor. In other words, if you have architect A and the model school is by B, they don't hand that plan over to the other architect. You work with the architect that's responsible for that model school, which may or may not affect your decision of which project.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Dale?
This is Karen. Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you. I was just wondering, and I'm really glad you asked the questions about the model school program. I'm anxious to get some more information, and I'm not sure this is the appropriate forum, but basic things like would a school that we need in this program fit in with the land we have available at that site. But aside from that, I had a quick question about the school projects selected. Were any of them participants in this model school program, the other examples I gave you?
I don't know, Melda, if you know, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think that would be known yet, you know, the
Yeah, I
other
don't think
ones
it's
that-
known.
Yeah, they'd be like you, they wouldn't have. We,
I'm referring to the chart of the schools you selected that are in your presentation in the packet.
oh, of those, no, I don't think any of those were, no.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, because that particular chart was, those aren't even necessarily this year, but, and though, that is just this phase. Most of the savings won't be in this, you know, in these immediate tasks for the current appropriation. It would largely be seen in the next, before the next appropriation.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions for GNAP? Thank you, Dale. We appreciate all the hard work. We appreciate the information. I think you've, have you covered everything you were gonna cover, first of all?
I believe so. I mean, the only other thing that we had here, if you want to talk about is, but I'll be real, is after you do that schematic design feasibility, then you fund the construction, you know, and that's looking out a couple of years as you kind of pointed out the schedule, Fidel. And then you would, and then there's a process for doing the final documents and construction and so on. But I don't think there's anything that's.
If you wanna cover the sort of final phases, in a quick broad brush, you did mention you were gonna go into that. I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Off track.
So really after funding, after completing that schematic design, doing the project funding agreement, then you would be authorized, you would vote the construction dollars, and then you would vote the dollars to complete the design and the construction dollars. So that's one vote that happens at that time. And then you do the detailed design, meaning, the construction documents, and put it out to bid and go through the construction and ultimately, the post occupancy, just evaluation and so on. So it's really two main votes. One, this current one that we're talking about, and then after you get the schematic design, you sort of lock it in, and then you vote the appropriation. So it's a good process in that, the town has to take their vote and approve the project and fund construction before you spend the money on the last part of final design. MSBA, is interested in that because they don't want to spend a lot of time going through with a town who ultimately doesn't approve the project. And then meanwhile, some other town didn't get a school done because, they were doing it. So that's the reason they asked for, you to fund the project before it's the final design and the bidding. It's not as ideal because, the construction costs should vary a little bit, but, it's done routinely, it's not. And so that's really the phase. There are interim submissions to MSBA along the way. They primarily, that's really just to check in, and you have an OPM and a designer who has a responsibility to you. They're investing money. They do some periodic checks to just make sure they're getting what they're paying for as well. But that's really the key element. Once you get what you're funding now, the next stages are really the most critical, probably in terms of the design and funding.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you and your team thank you guys for all your hard work. Carla, did you have one more question?
One more question, Dale. Can you talk about reimbursement percentages? Typical, and I know you don't like answering this question, typical reimbursement percentages.
Well, we all dance around this, and in the end, I think it's essentially, it comes out to like around the 50%. And again, because it's not a hard to like multiply by point whatever. There are certain things that are eligible, certain things that are not eligible, like some site costs, swing space is not eligible, hazardous material, really, it's site hazardous material, asbestos, say, in building is, but, and so it depends on a particular project. You know, you gotta kind of add all the things up and then see what that percentage comes out to be, but it hovers in that area, 50%, perhaps a little bit more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. And thank you for all your hard work on this, working with the town on this project.
Well, it's been a very good experience. We hope it's all very helpful to you, and you know where you are if you have any other questions.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dale.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the minutes is discuss preparation for town meeting. I don't know, Fidel, if you wanna just walk us through kind of where we're at now and
Yeah.
and what the next steps are we should be taking.
Absolutely. So we have a draft article and a draft motion that our town council has put together, and it is now with the MSBA for final confirmation. It is our intent to put the article and the motion in November town meeting. The request is going to be to appropriate from free cash, $2.2 million, as explained by Dale, for this next phase. So that is the request. I think, you know, we gotta figure out how that is presented to town meeting. I imagine that some version of this presentation combined with a community kind of oriented presentation of you know why the Killam School has to be replaced, right? I mean, and we've all talked about it, the lead lines in the building, you can't drink the water, right? I mean, there's a lot of reasons that I think Dale didn't cover that I think we can share as a community. So that's the intent, anyways, for town meeting. So the school committee is having two meetings, one in August, and then one on September 15th, I want to say, to have an official vote on the article. The school committee is having a public hearing on September 8th at 7:30 p.m. at the Scatini Memorial Library, High School. I'm sorry, library. And we will post the public hearing in the newspaper, and it'll be shared as well. But that's going to be a big format, I'll say, to gather any community input that we might have, and then the select board is closing the warrant on September 20th. So on September 20th, the select board will vote to close the warrant, which hopefully will include this article.
Okay. So what, going back to that article, is that something that this committee should review, or is that something this committee needs to vote on?
You know, it would be a good idea to have the committee vote on it.
So do we need to vote on that by September
September
20th?
20th, exactly.
Will our next meeting be before September 20? That's my next question.
There you go.
Okay, so our next meeting would be the 19th.
Perfect.
So we should plan to review that motion,
An article, yeah.
review that article and vote at the next meeting.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, and at that point, the school committee will have voted on it on the 15th, and the MSBA will have confirmed that the language of the article is appropriate.
Okay. Is there anything else we, as a committee, should be doing? I know school committee is kind of taking the lead on a lot of the communication. But is there anything else we as a committee need to do between now and September 20, or between now and town meeting?
Well, we're having an informal listening session on the August 29th at our meeting, and then our formal hearing on September 8th.
What were those dates again?
So August 29th,
Is it an informal
informal, but the more formal hearing on September 8th.
on September 8th? Okay.
So if people want, if this committee wants to attend, they're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, it might make sense. It definitely makes sense for some of us, anyone that wants to, certainly, to attend.
Yes.
And that's at 7.
Yeah, to,
There, this is Karen, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So, I attended the school committee the other night, and, so I have concerns about, how the discussion at town meeting will go. So under that agenda item, the initial question is, who will lead the presentation for the justification? And it is absolutely, the right thing to do to have these informal and formal listening sessions and public sessions, and then we'll still get to town meeting and not everyone will be completely up to speed. So is it going to be the school building committee, or will it be the school committee presenting this? And the two items, which actually these listening sessions will be very educational. They'll be a preview of town meeting questions, but I can already see, since a major deliverable for the MSBA was enrollment projections, and the data behind those projections is pretty dated, that's going to be a concern for town meeting. And I shared that with the chair of the select board, and he agreed. We're very likely to get questions about why are we using the 2010 census? Why are we, looking back to 2005 to 2006? And the other items that came out of that school committee meeting were, because enrollment did drop, I think we've all heard that and we'll hear it again, but the MECO program was expanded and school choice has been implemented. So I guess whoever presents this, the two items that I can guarantee that would be questions are, how did we come to that $2.2 million number? And even though this presentation tonight made it a little clearer, I think we could refine it a little bit more, or be prepared for more detailed questions. And again, with enrollment, I think in other town meetings past, when we've had major spending discussions, we've had lots of questions about, where's the enrollment to justify the spending? And because there'll always be members of town meeting who just want to ask those kind of questions. So that would be my feedback. And these items, so we need to prepare for them. Whoever is going to present this to town meeting, this warrant, which will be very simple. All of the meat and potatoes is in this presentation and these other discussions. So who's going to be up there leading this discussion and being ready to answer these questions?
I think what we have been talking about is actually mostly our superintendent, actually. But obviously with the help of the architect, right, who shared his presentation, and my help as well. But it's mostly our superintendent.
Okay, so the gentleman who presented tonight will be there. That was kind of one of my questions.
Absolutely. Oh, he will absolutely be there.
Okay, very good. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I would agree that the school side should take the lead on that presentation, because it is the number one question, or number one question will be, why do we need this? And it's really a school need that needs to be, that's driving the bus on this program, is the need for additional space in the schools, not necessarily a facility issue where the building's fallen down and unsafe. So.
Agreed.
Right, it's a combination.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, Killam becomes the obvious solution because it is in need of many repairs if we don't go this route. So, okay. I think you covered the next two items in one fell swoop: the town meeting and the upcoming school committee meetings. Anything else to add on those school committee meetings, Carla?
No, we want to provide an opportunity for people to hear about the project, right?
Yep.
We want multiple touch points for people to be able to hear about the project prior to town meeting and at town meeting. So.
Okay. It'll be good for as many of us who can attend to be there, to show support and to answer any questions, whether they be facility or school related.
And this $2.2 million dollars is reimbursable later on when the project is further on down the road.
That is correct.
Yeah.
It goes into the
Exactly,
entire cost of the project.
exactly.
It's not fully reimbursed.
I'm sorry,
It's not fully reimbursed.
that's right, it's part of
It's
the,
part of
it's
the-
part of the chunk of the-
Assuming we had a 50% reimbursement rate, we'd get 1.1, and we spent the 2.2, we'd get 1.1 back
Exactly,
at the.
So it would
at the
never
final.
be, it would never be reimbursable totally. is it?
exactly.
What is the difference between the informal meeting on the 29th and the formal meeting on September 8th? What does informal and formal mean?
That's a great question. Well, part of it is how it is for our regulations and how we have to have a formal hearing, right? There are certain legal requirements.
Public hearing versus
Public hearing,
Exactly.
just an invited guests here.
Right. There's legal requirements for public hearings.
Why would they not both be formal meetings, let's put it that way?
Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, so in order to have a public hearing, you got to post it on the, in the Chronicle for 2 weeks. It's got to be right. So the one on September 8th is got to be a public hearing. I guess it's the term that is used. It's a public hearing.
Public hearing, but what's the informal meeting? What's the difference?
I think it's
You,
just
you're
to
gonna
get,
you're gonna post that as well. I mean, you're gonna let people know.
Yeah.
it's gonna be posted like a school committee meeting would be posted, but it doesn't have the legal requirements of further postings
Yes.
under open meeting law.
Yeah.
We're trying to provide as many opportunities as possible.
Are you going to invite town meeting members to either of these meetings
We-
specifically?
Yep, we will invite town meeting members to the one on September 8th.
Fidel, we keep talking about replacing Killam, as if that's a done deal, as opposed to incorporating a part of the existing building into the new scheme. Is there any wording going on in any of these warrants or whatever it is, which commits to replacing?
So,
Replacing may not be the best option.
yeah, we had a lot of emails today actually with town council about this topic. We are of the opinion that replacement includes a significant renovation, right, or a significant change to the building, right? So where renovation kind of you're implying that you're not changing the shell, if you will, right? Like you're doing improvements. I think what we heard from Dale is that they looked at that, right? They looked at doing a 100% internal renovation, and that it was not advantageous, right? Now, could it be that a portion of the building, remains in place while something else happens? Maybe, right? But that is what is flushed out in the next piece. But we feel that the word replacement takes that into account. A major change to the building, I would call replacement.
Okay. Do you have a sense of what a new Killam school would be? How much square footage increase would it be over the existing? Any sense right now as to numbers?
I think Dale probably would have, or me.
Those
Yeah,
numbers,
yeah.
I think that those numbers could be derived from his program.
Right.
Because we know what the existing square footage of Killam is. And if we just, in the program, does anyone know what the existing square footage of Killam is? Is it 50,000 square feet? Do I have that right?
I heard 60,000 at the last school committee meeting.
That's correct.
That's
It's around 60,000 square feet.
60,000? So the proposed at the end of the study that they did, I believe it was approximately 125,000 square foot new elementary school. So presumably, 125 minus 65,000 square feet would be plus or minus would be added on and rent to the existing building and renovated. And let me see if I have this right. So replacement in its global term includes potentially renovation of existing.
Yeah.
There has been one pass at that concept in the study that GNAP has already done, and they found it to be non-advantageous.
Yes.
But it wouldn't be completely ruled off the table during the upcoming feasibility study, the 2.2 million.
That is accurate.
Okay. Anyone else, any other questions? Comments on where we are? So I think the next item on the agenda is our next meeting dates, which sounds like our next meeting will be September 19th.
6 p.m. in this room, most likely.
So every third Monday,
Yeah.
right?
We set them.
So did we establish the specific dates at the last meeting?
We said the third Monday.
Okay. Not,
Probably can just,
do we want to do that right now, are you
Exactly.
saying?
yeah, put them out there.
How will we go to the end of the year? So that'd be September 19th, October 17th,
I think we should skip November because it's
Town meeting.
town meeting.
skip November, and it would be December 19th.
It's a eggnog.
We can keep going, but the New Year's a good time to end. Okay, so,
Great.
so that'll be those, dates. Next item on the agenda, unless anyone has any, we're all good with those dates, I assume?
I was just thinking, we're going to learn a lot at this August 29th informal meeting. I think we're going to get a sense of the questions people are asking. I'm just wondering whether we would need to have a meeting before September 20th to kind of absorb that and find whether we need to have any different direction.
Good question. So question with how things are put together for town meeting. So on the 20th, the select board will vote on the warrant.
Yes, sir.
So we'll have a chance to take one last pass at the warrant article we're proposing. And presuming on the 20th, the select board votes to put that on the warrant, and it's gonna be on town meeting. What's the deadline for, assuming someone, the superintendent, Tom, is gonna have like maybe a PowerPoint presentation for town meeting, what's his deadline for having that presentation put together?
Yeah, I mean, and before I answer that question, the article and the vote is pretty cookie cutter from the MSBA, right? I mean, like it's you know, I don't think we're changing the article. To answer your question, I would say early November, right? I mean,
Early November.
so we do have some time.
So after the September 19 meeting, we'll have the October 17 meeting to digest things and talk. And I guess the October meeting, we'd probably want to make sure Tom is at the meeting
Great.
and has some things you know, prepared, or you know, we can discuss you know what he's going to present, how he presents it, and you know, Karen had some excellent points about where she thinks things are gonna go, and I think she's spot on with that. So that seems like it would line up timeline wise.
Yeah, my concern is that we'll get kind of questions at these meetings, school committee meeting, which are kind of sets us thinking about different issues,
Yeah.
and we need time to think about those different issues. I get a sense we're having too few meetings over the next 2 or 3 months, and you know, I hate to suggest it, but That's my concern, is that we won't have time to really understand what the mood is of the people who come to these meetings and stuff.
Well, I think we'll have a pretty good break. It's, today's the 22nd, next Monday is the first meeting. Then the Thursday after Labor Day is the formal, public hearing. And then, a week and a half after that, we'll be meeting.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think that's a pretty good spread. Anything beyond that is gonna be, challenging. That's meeting, not necessarily as a board, but that's between tonight's meeting and the meeting on the 19th, that's 4 different, places for all of us to be, or at least some of us to be. So,
Okay, if we go to, which I hope we do, go to meetings on the 29th and September 8th, that constitutes a quorum.
yeah.
So we have to be careful of that.
Yeah,
We can post for you.
We'll,
That's fine.
we'll likely have a quorum. Hopefully, I intend to do everything I can to go there, and I encourage everyone
Yeah.
on the committee to do the same. We'll probably have a quorum of the school building committee and the permanent building committee.
Yes.
And I guess we'll just call a meeting to order.
Yes.
And then adjourn it. Okay. So I think we're on to the next item, which is approval of the minutes from July 18, 2022. I don't know if everyone had a chance to read through the minutes, but if you haven't, if you take a minute to read through it, and if anyone has any comments.
Yeah, I need to be listed as the member that was present. Mine got omitted.
Okay.
Kaylin, I don't know if you
Apologies for
can
that.
pull it up, but if, we'll make the change.
Yep.
Thank you.
And, John, for my nomination, John seconded it. Did you have it for the chair, first and second? Right, and it's, so for the chair position, I nominated, Nazaro nominated Tompkins for chair, Herrick seconded. McLaughlin nominated Nazaro for vice chair, but you don't have a second, John Coop seconded it.
So basically, we're adding Kirk to the attendees and adding that John second the motion for Nazaro for vice chair. Great.
So unless anyone else has any other comments, maybe we could have a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Second?
Uh, All in favor?
Aye.
You gotta do a roll call vote.
Okay,
Karen.
sorry, all right. We'll start with you, Karen.
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Kirk,
Aye.
Carla,
Aye.
Endry. Aye. Nancy,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. You all right over there? Okay, so
Sorry,
that passed. Next item, any new business?
So Joe Huggins just texted asking if October 17th was a Jewish holiday.
It's Hanukkah, the first day of Hanukkah. I was just
So-
gonna say that
So
too.
October 17th might not work.
I think that's December 17th, October 17th,
I don't know.
December 17th. May not work.
You have December 19th.
December 19th.
But October 17th, we're pretty sure is another holiday.
It might be, that might be more important, let's see. I don't either.
He said, sorry.
All right, so why don't we leave those 3 dates, September 19th, October 17th, and December 19th on the calendar till the end of the year, and we'll have an opportunity to change the October 17th meeting if we find out it's a holiday that we're not aware of.
Sounds good.
Shoshana is September.
December 19th.
Yeah, December.
December 19th is, huh? Oh, right, yeah, right, so I'm way behind you guys.
Yeah, The October
I
one
can't
doesn't
find-
appear to be.
So,
How about if we, do we want to do it on December 12th?
yeah, I agree, I would go to December 12th. So we'll change December 19th to December 12th.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
And anyone with any new business? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Seconded.
There you go.
Do I need a roll call vote for that, Fidel?
Yes, sir.
Karen? Vote.
Great job, thanks all, aye.
Greg?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Kirk?
Aye.
Carla?
Aye.
Andrew? Aye. Nancy?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Aye.